first part of this demonstration, we're going to be looking at the concept of uploads, downloads, and the potential conflicts that can arise. The scenario is really simple. On an Intelligent Advisor hub, if I go to the permissions tile, you'll see I have two users that we're going to focus on. Me, Richard, and another user, Anna. Both Richard and Anna have the author role, so we're going to be involved in writing rules and working with an Intelligent Advisor project. We both have permissions on the same workspace, so the workspace is called Airline Projects, and just to make it quite clear, you'll see that Anna has author role on this workspace, and so does Richard. For the purposes of our demo, this has little impact. It's just to make it clear that we're going to be working inside this workspace. So now that we've set this up, let's go and join Richard for the first part of the demo. Richard is going to create a new project. He's creating it locally on his machine, as you always do. Richard is a good citizen, so as soon as he's created his project, he remembers that he needs to set his hub location, and he makes sure that his hub location is correct, and he logs in. So currently on the hub, there are no versions defined. Richard begins his work. He goes to the rules folder, and he opens up his first Word document. In his Word document, for the purposes of brevity, we'll make a very short rule. So Richard has created his first rule. He validates. And upon returning to Oracle Policy Modeling, he clicks Add Project to Repository to add his new project into the repository at this hub. Let's add a little comment and add it to the repository. He has only access to one workspace, so he can click OK and go ahead and store it up there. Over on the ribbon, now we only see upload and download. So let's say that Richard is now finished with his work for the day. Let's go and visit Anna. Over on the other PC, Anna, as a good citizen, is going to check that there are any projects on the hub that she's been told she needs to work on. And she sees that there's a project here that she has been told she needs to work on. She creates a local copy by downloading it from the hub. Back on the Project tab, you'll notice that she doesn't have the Add Project to Repository button because, of course, it was already added to the repository by Richard. Let's say that Anna begins to work. She opens up the Word document that Richard created earlier, and let's say that she creates a new rule. And she sees that she has the icon to tell her that she has made a local modification compared to the version that was stored on the hub, so that when she goes to upload changes, she can see a summary of the changes she's made. She's created two attributes through the rule that she entered into Word. Notice the different icons. The plus showing new attributes and the tick mark showing modified elements. She clicks Upload. So now in terms of versions, the first version was created by Richard and then it was worked on by Anna, and we have a potential for conflict if these two don't watch what they're doing. Okay, so now that we have created these two versions, let's switch back to Richard. On Richard's PC, you'll notice that currently it's showing him that he has his version stored on the hub, but he hasn't seen that Anna has already worked on the hub as well to create a version 2. In an ideal world where Richard and Anna actually communicate, Anna would have already told Richard through various physical means, email, face-to-face, telephone, that there is a new version. We should even say that Richard should be in the habit of either clicking download changes just to see if there's a new version, at which point he would be informed that there's a new version. He doesn't have to download it immediately. Or alternatively, as a good citizen, he could go to the Hub website. He could go to the Hub website, log in, click the project tile, and see for himself that there are now 2 versions, including a later version produced by Anna. So there are plenty of ways for Richard to remain informed as to what's going on. So we're going to imagine that Richard quite simply ignores all of this information and proceeds to create a problematic situation. Richard is going to go and edit this rules file. He's going to ignore the fact that he can see an icon that says there's an updated version on the hub. He's going to ignore the fact that at this point he should be downloading the second version. He's going to ignore the fact that he can see it here. He's going to open the file. He's still going to ignore the message, which is even more explicit now. And he's going to add a new piece of text. At which point he has a second message telling him he is now in complete conflict with the latest versions on the hub. And he sees this message again. So that when he attempts to upload his changes, he's still reminded there's a conflict, which he continues to ignore. He sees a message telling him he cannot upload because the changes have been made by somebody else on the hub. So he's forced to download his changes and to try again. If he downloads the changes, I beg your pardon, he will essentially be losing the modification that he made. So he has 2 choices here. He can either simply delete the work that he's done manually, or he can revert the modifications and say yes, at which point he's back to square one. But at least now he can download the changes without any issues. So now he's looking at the same version as Anna was looking at. He has brought down the changes to the file. He can now continue to work and continue to upload his changes if he makes some. So let's go ahead and return back to Anna for the next part of our demo. For the next part of our demo, Anna and Richard are going to both work on the same file simultaneously, and we're going to see the graphical messages that Oracle Intelligent Advisor shows the user in order to understand what's going on. So Anna is going to open the rules document. Before she does so, she's going to make sure that she has the correct version, which is good practice, and she's going to open the Word document. At the same time, Richard is going to work on his PC and open the same document. Anna is going to make a change and validate the change. On Richard's PC, Richard is going to make different modifications. Immediately, we can see that we are warned that Anna is working on this document. So we can see which element she's working on. And Richard is going to reinstate the change that he tried to make earlier. And now we have a different message to remind us that although we've made a change successfully, we are in conflict with work done by Anna, because Anna was the first one to open the file and make the change. So we're back in this situation where Richard cannot successfully complete his upload, because when he tries to upload, he's being told that somebody else is actually working on the document currently, and this is a problem. You can see a reason why in an earlier module I suggested that you made sure that your users of your hub had easily recognizable names, because now we can see that it's Anna or Richard or somebody else rather than user 1 or user 2, which gets very easy to get confused with. So Richard once again is in a complicated situation. He cannot upload because he's in conflict with the work done by somebody else. Richard has one potential way of getting around this, but it's not really a workaround in the sense that it's not anything more than trying to save work that you've already done. Richard is going to copy this work, is going to create a new document, is going to paste his work in here, and is going to set it to comments. So although it's present in the project, it won't actually be applied. But if Richard wants to come and get this later on and copy and paste it back into a document, he can. And Richard has to go through the process of, let's call this Richard's backup. Richard can now safely go to the project tab, attempt an upload, revert the modifications. You'll notice that when I right-clicked, it said revert the modifications or steal ownership from Anna, which essentially allows Richard to run, to take control of the situation and impose his version. This would be our very much last resort, and I see no reason for this to be done unless Anna is either away on holiday, off on sick leave, or there is some other situation where there is no easier way to get out of this, which would allow Richard to take control and potentially Anna to be now pushed into the same situation as Richard. So we're going to say revert modifications and say yes, close. Richard's going to upload. So Richard has imposed his version, which means that now there are 2 documents in here, including Richard's backup, so that when Richard and Anna finally start talking and finally work out what should have been done, Richard's attempted changes will be available here in the backup file. This little demo hopefully has begun to show you how the one thing missing in this sequence of events between Richard and Anna is common sense, closely followed by communication. If either Richard or Anna had picked up the phone, sent an email, walked over and spoken, if Richard had remembered to check for versions on the hub or had tried to click download to see if there was anything else available, we would have avoided all of these changes. We would have avoided all of these unnecessary documents and unnecessary administrative steps. We've created unnecessary versions for no reason. So the golden rule is, although there are plenty of things to warn you that a conflict is occurring, you can still ignore them and slowly but surely back one or more people into a situation where you have to create backup documents, copy and paste, lose work, recopy documents. It's just unnecessary. So in the second part of our demo, we're going to be looking at inclusions. Inclusions, as the name suggests, allow you to include projects inside another project. The concept is very simple and is very easy to implement, but there are a couple of things that can make it a little more difficult on a daily basis to understand what's going on. So here I am with Richard, and I am still logged into Intelligent Advisor in the hub, and I have this project that we saw in the previous demo. Let's imagine that there is another project on the hub. So if I go to Hub Projects, let's imagine that there's this project here, Airline Project 2, which contains useful entities, useful attributes, and useful rules that I want to reuse in this project. So I go to Inclusions, and I go to the Add button, and I select the project that I'm interested in. When I add the inclusion, I am always adding the latest version. So I'm adding version 6, and I will be adding all these items to my project. So now I'm still working on this project, but I have included this project. When I go to the Rules tab, I will be informed of anything that has been added from the inclusion. When I go to the Data tab, same thing. When I go to the Interview tab, same thing. So it's clear to me which elements have been added from the inclusion and which elements come from the original project. So far, so good. So the project that has been included is called Airline Project 2 and is currently on version 6. Let's switch over to Anna's PC and let's imagine that Anna is actually working on Airline Project 2. So Anna is working directly on this project. So Anna can see all of the attributes, the rules that are a part of the inclusion. So let's imagine that Anna makes a modification. She changes the type of one of the attributes. And she uploads her changes. And she uploads her changes. Back on Richard's PC, Richard included the project in version 6, but Richard doesn't know that there is now a version 7. Richard should take time to run the inclusions report, which generates a CSV file, which tells him that his inclusion is not up to date. Richard can, of course, use more traditional means, like talking to his colleagues, to find out if something has changed. What can Richard do? Richard can choose to do nothing, which means he is still using version 6. Richard can update to version 7. Richard can remove the inclusion when he decides he doesn't need it anymore. Let's choose update. He's informed that he will reach version 7, so his inclusion is now up to date. And we should be able to see the changes. Now let's take a look at some of the other functionality here on the Inclusion tab. Obviously, remove should make perfect sense. It will simply remove the project. Let's look at a particular scenario that is quite interesting, however. This is an attribute through the inclusion. We're going to make a change here locally So this is a local change. This attribute was added in this project, even though this attribute comes from this project. So we have a situation where we have subclassed, we have modified version 7 locally, which means we have options such as reset, which means we could choose to return to the base version 7. And if we do so, the change we just made would be eliminated. So we would be rolling back any changes that were made locally to attributes or elements that came from the included project. Perhaps the most concerning one from a management point of view is that anyone who has access to the inclusion can also open the inclusion directly, which means that I will actually download and open the project and modify it directly. Think about what might happen if you accidentally create a change in the inclusion rather than simply creating a local change to modify something that has been included. If I was to open the project that was included, make a change, upload the change, it could potentially affect all other users who have included this project. So you have to think very carefully when you are working with inclusions. Do I want to make a local change, such as this one, which will impact only this project? Or do I want to open the inclusion itself, make a change, which will change the latest version number available, which will potentially impact everybody who uses this inclusion, because there could be 10, 20 projects that use this inclusion. The final button we're going to talk about at the moment is remove and remove sounds like it's very obvious. I'm going to click remove. A bunch of stuff will be removed. And I'll return to data, and you'll see I have lost all the objects. Everything that came from the inclusion has been removed. So when working with inclusions, be very careful about removing projects, because they could potentially mean that rules stop working. All sorts of things could potentially go wrong. It's really a last gasp.
So that wraps it up after the demo for chapter 13. Collaboration is essential in my eyes if you have more than one rule author, clearly. It becomes very hard to manage with local zip files, sending each other zip files, messing around with copy and paste. It's never going to be working. Collaboration gives you more efficient tracking of development versions, but it doesn't give you a fully fledged branching and merging operation. Inclusions give you some degree of reusability, but it's not as good as it might sound. There are some areas where you're going to have to pay attention, and I hope we called those out for you during the demo. So that wraps it up for Module 13.